And we start with a Fox News alert. Israel and Iran trading fire overnight, testing the already fragile ceasefire with the most strikes we have seen in months. President Trump posting to Truth Social just a few minutes ago saying, quote, Israel and Iran must immediately stop shooting.
Nice try. It's not going to work. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst is live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Trey.
Yeah, guys, good morning. An eventful 24 hours across the Middle East. Just last hour, more explosions reported in the Iranian capital of Tehran as Israel goes on the offensive, responding to waves of ballistic missiles that were fired at this country overnight. This all started yesterday afternoon when the IDF struck the Lebanese capital of Beirut, hitting the Dakhya neighborhood, a Hezbollah stronghold. Iranian officials later threatened to target Israel and then launched waves of ballistic missiles toward the northern part of this country, sending hundreds of thousands of people into bomb shelters. Now, as those missiles were soaring through the skies of Israel, I was on the phone with President Trump getting his reaction. He said, what I would suggest to Iran, you've shot your missiles, that's enough. Get back to the table and make a deal. Israel later launched a series of airstrikes against central and western Iran, going after military targets and air defense systems there. They later hit a petrochemical plant in the western part of Iran. The Iranians responded with more waves of ballistic missiles against this country, and the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen also launched 2 missiles towards central Israel, triggering sirens in Tel Aviv. A lot of kinetic action overnight. Back and forth sirens sounding across this country, millions of people in bomb shelters, and the region now waits to see if there will be more Iranian fire in the hours ahead. Guys?
So right now, Trey, is Israel on war in 2 fronts? Is it also hitting back? So it's hitting back not only in Israel, it's hitting back inside Lebanon, right?
Yes, this remains a multi-front war, and we should be very clear here. The ceasefire is over. Iran is launching dozens of ballistic missiles at this country. The Israelis are conducting extensive airstrikes across Iran. This is not a ceasefire. This is a return to war. President Trump is calling on both sides to stop shooting. He would like to see a return to the negotiating table and reach a diplomatic solution to end the regional conflict. When I spoke with the president last night, he told me he was not happy that the Israelis struck the Lebanese capital of Beirut. That led to this exchange of fire. When you talk with Israeli officials, they say we've been coming under Hezbollah rocket and drone attacks and had no other option. But again, the president just minutes ago taking to True Social, calling on both Israel and Iran to cease fire. At this moment, the Israelis are facing incoming fire, not just from Iran, but also from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and that attack from the Houthis, which was very rare. We saw today the sirens sounding across Tel Aviv early this morning. It served as an alarm clock for the Israeli people here in Israel's second largest city. And we could hear the explosions in the distance as that incoming fire was shot down.
Trey, do you get the impression, I understand the goal of peace, and I think it's admirable that the president is trying to accomplish that. But since now that they have returned to the offensive campaign, it's only a matter of time before the United States has to respond as well. I mean, we do joint operations with Israel. Now that Iran is back in the game and not just Hezbollah, we're pretty much doomed to be able to be in the fight again as well, right?
Yeah, an Israeli military official tells Fox News this morning that the United States is helping with defense right now to shoot down some of this incoming fire. Remember, the Israelis not just have a tiered missile defense system that we'll go through very briefly here with the Iron Dome, David Sling, and the Arrow 2 and 3 systems, but they also have the U.S.-supplied Patriot and THAAD systems that can help to shoot down the fire here, but also in neighboring Jordan and regional countries that have U.S. systems. Right now, the Israelis are the ones conducting the airstrikes against Iran. The United States is not involved, according to our reporting at this hour. Now, certainly this could escalate. Iranian officials are already threatening to expand their missile strikes across the region and target critical energy infrastructure in the Gulf. Now, if that happens, you may see more direct involvement from U.S. Central Command and those U.S. forces that are spread throughout the region. Remember, more than 50,000 U.S. service members, along with destroyers and U.S. aircraft carriers, prepared if President Trump does order those strikes. But again, the latest thinking that we have from the president, just on True Social, he is calling on Israel and Iran to stop firing at each other. But at this point, the question is whether or not they're going to listen, because we are not looking at a small quarrel, an exchange of fire like we've seen in the Persian Gulf in recent weeks, where there are a few drones or missiles exchanged with a few airstrikes. This is a war right now. And we are looking at around 30 ballistic missiles that were launched into Israel and dozens of Israeli strikes that targeted the Iranian regime.
So I guess we're back to square one now, right? I mean, the president suggested that a deal was close, and he said, but, quote, now this takes place. He was also talking about the supreme leader says he's younger and he's more rational than his father, the Ayatollah. He said he is part of the talks. He says he's very badly injured, but he has not spoken to him directly. Trey?
Yes. And when I spoke with President Trump last night, he told me he thought a deal could be reached Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday of this week. And now this happens. And so obviously there's a recalculation taking place. But the president has been working overtime to try and reach a diplomatic solution with the Iranians that would do a few things. It would open the Strait of Hormuz, ultimately address Iran's nuclear ambitions, and stop the rising regional tension. And the president still believes he can get this deal done. Remember, this is a president who has made difficult deals in the Middle East, including the one that ended the war between Israel and Hamas several months ago. And when we look at the situation now, this is, again, an off-ramp for the Iranian regime. And the president talked a little bit about this when I spoke with him last night. He said, look, if the United States were to return to bombing Iran, it would cause significant damage to the infrastructure of the country, and not just the infrastructure that supports the military, but also the civilian population there, around 90 million Iranians. And that is why the president so far has avoided hitting desalination plants, and he's not yet hit those power plants that he spoke about a couple of months ago at the end of Operation Epic Fury, understanding that this would unravel the situation even further. And he wants to exert all effort possible to reach a diplomatic solution before returning to military combat operations. Now, again, at this moment, the war has resumed in limited capacity, specifically between Iran and Israel. The president is calling on both sides to stop firing. But we know, according to the Israeli military, around 30 incoming ballistic missiles were counted by forces here, and the Israelis have launched dozens of strikes against the Iranian regime.
Wow. And then, of course, we see where those launchers were, and then we'll take note of that, and so will the Israelis, because we could see everything. Thanks so much, Trey. Obviously, every time we go to them, it's going to be different. A couple of things. I think that the Israelis are trying to be measured, but they are being hit. Hezbollah never signed on to any peace deal. So he was saying, well, Lebanon and Israel are talking, and how going to have peace? And Hezbollah says, no, started rocketing Israel again. So they have to answer back. They said, well, I want you to be more surgical. So Israel Katz, defense minister, says, we are. We wiped out 4 IRGC members. What are they doing in Lebanon? You're not killing Lebanese Christians. You're killing IRGC, who are arming up and training Hezbollah to rocket Israel.
Well, there's a distinction between the Lebanese people, Lebanese government, and the terror group.
Right.
So, I mean, that's one thing.
They want Hezbollah out.
We keep merging them together when we're talking about, but they're separate. There can be talks between Israel and the government, but that has nothing to do with the terror group.
And Mike Huckabee, who's our ambassador there, he was actually on X from a shelter. He also wrote this on X, which is a good reminder of how dangerous Iran is. Iran fired missiles at Israel last night and early today. The missile alert sounded at 6 a.m. in Jerusalem. They were intercepted, thank God. Iran and its proxy agents of evil want to incinerate America and Israel. Mothership of Satan is in Tehran.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.